Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of The Unorthodox Social Worker, where we do discuss all things social work from an unorthodox perspective. Pardon me today. I'm going to smoke myself a little cigarette, all right? Smoking is bad. Don't blame me, but it's kind of funny how many of y'all out there who are social workers who worked at a agency where everybody is frequently, all the staff members are frequently taking a cigarette break because they are very high stressed from their work. But that's irrelevant. But please don't forget to like and subscribe, share, all that good stuff. It really helps my channel get more viewership. And I do want to thank all the viewers who have been rocking with me so far. I've been getting a lot more comments and a lot more engagements. So I want to appreciate y'all. And for those types of, those new viewers, please enjoy this type of content. So the topic at hand today is, why are there so many vacant homes in the housing market here in San Francisco Bay Area and even the whole country? And this kind of relates to the Moms for Housing case. I did hear these stats, like I've said in previous videos, that here in the Bay Area, where we do have a major homeless and housing crisis, there's about 5 vacant units for every homeless individual. And why is it that there are so many homeless people, but yet we have all these empty houses that aren't being utilized? Why could we not utilize these houses to house homeless individuals? And that was the reason why, Moms for Housing were fighting against this company, Wedgwood Properties, a shell investment company. They left their house vacant, so these moms figured they would take over the house. But the first reason I'm going to give why I believe there are so many open housing units here in San Francisco, the first one I'm going to say is the Ellis Act eviction. Now, you might know about this law. I don't know why they created it. It was kind of a stupid law. But one aspect of it is that under the Ellis Act eviction, a landlord here in San Francisco can evict any tenant they want without due cause if they promise the government that they will keep that house off of the rental or seller's market for a period of 5 years. So I could have a giant apartment building with 20 tenants, evict them all, and it's apparently totally legit if no one occupies that house for 10 years. Now, why would a landlord want to do that? Let's say everybody in their unit is living on rent control and they want to make more money. Boom, they go ahead, they evict everybody. They hope and pray that the housing market is at least as strong or stronger than the time of the housing market when they evicted the people, in hopes that once the 5-year period is up, they can rent out those units for a higher cost, or sell the house and just cash out. Because if people were living there under rent control, they want to sell the house, they can't because they don't have a reason to evict people. Well, here they go, they use the Ellis Act, they evict them. 5 years later, they cash out on the property. Okay, so a stupid law. In my opinion, here in the Bay Area, California, they knew we have a homelessness and housing crisis. Why would you create a law that incentivizes landlords to own properties to be left vacant for years at a time, in this case 5 years? It essentially takes off tens of thousands of rental units off the housing market, not only leaving less houses to be rented out, but decreasing the supply of housing and thus increasing the cost of rent and things of that nature. So definitely Ellis Act evictions are one of the main reasons why I think there are so many vacant units in the housing market. The next reason I believe why there's so many vacant units is Airbnb. Essentially companies like Airbnb, they come here to places like San Francisco. People figure that they have a property, they will be more profitable by offering their property on Airbnb as compared to the free rental market. So they do Airbnb. And then again, like the Ellis Act eviction, they are taking off tens of thousands of units out of the housing market that could be utilized for permanent housing situations. There is need for more regulation on this. Some cities are very strict with Airbnb and companies like Uber that put limitations on their business within their jurisdictions because they know it affects the businesses that are already there. You know, Airbnb probably has a negative effect on hotel businesses. Okay. San Francisco did, I believe, put some regulations on Airbnb. I don't know the details of that, but I do definitely feel that there's more need for regulations on this housing share, Airbnb, whatever you want to call it. And that is a big reason why there are so many houses being taken off the market that could be utilized for permanent housing. The third reason why I believe why there's so many properties taken off the unit is because of people like in the case of Moms for Housing, shell companies such as Wedgwood Properties, who are essentially LLCs, limited liability corporations, companies who buy up properties with cash in full, and for whatever reason, which I'll go through in a second, for whatever reason, they keep that unit vacant for months, years at a time. I guess under current law, if you buy a property, you're entitled to do whatever you want with it. But these shell companies are buying houses and leaving them vacant for years when we could be putting homeless people in these companies. So I want to talk, because these companies are LLCs, so I kind of want to talk about the difference between a DBA and an LBC. So if I was to open up a business, let's say a t-shirt business, and you could compare it to a business of a property owner opening up a business, you can either open up a business as a DBA, doing business as, or an LLC. If I open up a business as a DBA, that means everything to do with that business, me as the individual is personally liable, financially liable for everything that happens in that company. So for example, if somebody wants to sue my company and they are awarded $5 million for them suing me, then that $5 million will come from my personal bank account. Or any other liabilities or anything that the company is held accountable for, that accountability will fall on me. So when you're doing a DBA, everything you have to do with that business, the individual is liable. Now, when you create a LLC, that is called a limited liability corporation, what essentially you are doing is you are opening up a business in a business name and not a personal name. Okay. And for example, in the same situation, if I opened up that t-shirt business as an LLC, then of course I'm going to have to open up new bank accounts under my business name. Now, if someone was to sue my business and they were awarded $5 million, that $5 million would have to be taken out of my business account, and they wouldn't be able to touch my personal account. Okay. I could have $20 million in my personal account, but they can't get that money because they're suing a business and they're not suing an individual. And then any kind of other illegitimate activities that I would have to be responsible for the liability would be held on the business and not the individual. So it is actually a very smart move to decrease personal liability in all businesses. Okay, and I'll give you a history. This is something I heard on a PBS story of why LLCs were created. Apparently a gas company, maybe it was Shell Gas, because these are called shell companies. Maybe that's where the name come from. A gas company lobbied Congress to create this LLC, or not Congress. They lobbied some government organization to create the business class of limited liability corporation. They planned on going to South America to conduct business in the oil industry, but conduct it as a LLC, as a sub-business of the main company. And why did they do this? So that when they went to South America, if any financial or business malpractice liabilities were to take place, that the parent company would not be held liable for anything, but in fact the LLC would be liable. And it would thus, decrease the responsibility of any wrongdoings from the parent company. And I know a lot of businesses and even nonprofits do the same thing, of where someone is a company, an LLC is and before I get into that, the major scrutiny here about LLCs is that apparently a group of journalists is suing the US Treasury because apparently The Treasury states that any citizen should know what individuals own these LLCs, but apparently the government is not giving up any of the names of individuals that own LLCs. Their argument is that if we were to give out their names, we would also have to give out their tax ID number, their social security number, leaving them open to fraud, and it's a data breach concern. So the main concern here in America is that LLCs own these companies, these same LLCs, they own these properties, and when you're trying to find out the individuals that own them, we're not able to access those names. While in other developed countries, the governments are very transparent about this, and it's very easy to find out who is behind these LLCs. So because you can't find out who is personally liable, okay, to who owns these LLCs, then that's a problem. Because, for example, if you got an LLC that is doing bad business practice, you can't find out who owns that company. They could own 20 other LLCs that is committing the same unethical business practices, and by being able to shield your name, you can just have one LLC gets closed down, and then you just open up a new LLC. Or, for example, a nonprofit that loses their money due to a bad audit, and then they just go create a new nonprofit. They shield their name, and they're able to apply for new funding. So we really need to figure out a way or a law to where we can find out who is behind these LLCs, and then we can hold them personally liable for bad business practices and for things like leaving vacant housing units open on the market. And then you ask, currently, how do you find out who owns a property? When I used to be a housing worker using government grants to pay for individuals' rent, of course, I would have to verify that whoever is coming to me posing as the landlord, I have to verify that that person or the LLC that they state they're associated with is in fact the owner. I could do that by using a subscription-based online service called RealQuest, where you type in the property and then it gives you various information. But one of the main things is it tells you who the owner is. So it'll tell you who owns the property, or what LLC owns the property, or sometimes maybe a trust would own the property. Okay, or you could just go to the assessor's office and figure out who that is. But people are using LLCs to shield their personal identity and essentially conduct bad business. Okay, now who is buying these trusts and LLCs? Okay, now it actually is, like I said, it's pretty much a smart business move. In the sense of a trust, I would suggest if anybody buys a house, buy it in a trust, because then if you die, then it's very clear who the property goes to. If it's owned by a company, by an LLC, it's very clear who that property will be passed on to. And probably a lot of these people using trusts and LLCs are renting the units, and they're not leaving them vacant, and it's totally legit. Now, just to tell you a little story before I go into the next part, the house that I grew up in where my mother lives, there is a apartment building right across the street that has been vacant for about 10, 15 years. She recently saw the gentleman who used to live there and asked the guy, why has this house been vacant for so long? And from what he found out was that the house was sold to a couple or something like that. And shortly thereafter, the house was sold to one of these shell company LLCs from China. And this Chinese LLC was sitting on the property waiting for regulations on building more stories to ease, because currently in that neighborhood, I believe you're not allowed to build more than X amount of units per space and not be able to build more than 2 or 3 stories. So this company has left the property off the market, waiting for housing construction regulation to ease. Then they plan on tearing down that building and building somewhat of a mega apartment complex with hopes that they will generate great profits from that. So this could be the case that a lot of people are buying properties cash, waiting for the restrictions to ease. while somebody could already be living there, waiting for the restrictions to ease, tear down the building, and create some kind of mega complex, maybe a luxury complex, so they can make um, way more money. Okay, so that's an interesting story. Now, I've also heard a lot of stories about foreign business investors buying up properties cash in America. And now, in a lot of these countries, such as China, Russia, who knows, maybe Iran, you could use as a perfect example recently, India. In a lot of these countries, their economies are so much more volatile than the American economy. And the American housing economy, buying a house in America is a pretty stable investment. So a lot of these business entrepreneurs in different companies are opening up LLCs and essentially putting their cash into houses because they know that cash probably will not decrease. It's a very good investment. It's a better investment than they could put their cash in any kind of investment within their own country. So I do feel it's kind of interesting how the US imposes different economic sanctions and policies on different countries to purposefully destabilize their economy as some sort of political consequence. How that is kind of biting us in the butt now. The fact that we have destabilized economies around the world and have decreased the amount of prospects that uh, investors and entrepreneurs can invest in their own company. Since we've created crappy economies in other countries, now there is a vast array of foreign investment being put into housing. And you got to remember, they're buying this stuff straight cash. So especially for an individual who's making illegitimate cash, this could be from drug dealing, human trafficking, or simply income that they're not filing taxes for, okay? You think about it, an individual makes illegitimate cash, they file for an LLC, they put that cash in the LLC, and they buy the property. And by the fact that the government is not releasing, or you can't trace who owns that LLC, you cannot follow the cash trail back to where the money came from. So if you investigate somebody doing bad business in LLC, it stops right there. Where did the money come from? It came from cash from somewhere. So this is actually a perfect way for individuals, both foreigners and people domestically, to store illegitimate cash in a legitimate investment. It's kind of like money laundering without paying the fee for money laundering. So it's actually a very good way, like I'm saying, to hide illegitimate cash because you can't trace where that cash came from. You can't trace the individual where that cash came from. And then also, even if it is legit, if it's totally legitimate cash, it's better to have cash in American property than an investment in a country with a very unstable um, economy. Okay, so very interesting. So, like I said, there's a lot of reasons why these investors essentially a lot of times just want to sit on the properties, wait till regulations ease, rebuild, or simply, in the case of Wedgwood, they are using straight up cash as an LLC, and for whatever reason, they are keeping houses off the market because if they know they sell that home or rent it out, then they're gonna have a harder time evicting that person and selling it when the housing market is at a very peak high. And the other interesting thing about it is whenever I hear about these stories about houses being taken off the market, and this is a loophole, is that it's always the house was sold to this couple or some unassuming entity or group of individuals. But ironically, soon after that, that property is sold to one of these shell companies. So the interesting part about it is perhaps because people who are owning these LLCs, their names are shielded, perhaps the first couple who bought the house could have had a personal relationship with the individual who owned the LLC. So that would minimize any conflicts of interest, okay? Because it could be a conflict of interest if somebody bought the house claiming that it was intended for their personal use, but they were already communicating with the shielded individual who owns the LLC with intent on selling that unit to that LLC, because it could break the terms of the bank, the terms of them getting the loan. You know what I mean? So a good way to basically just mask things, conceal things, reduce conflict of interest, and reduce ultimately personal, ethical, and financial liability in these situations. So I say all that to say that we need to come up with new laws that regulate these types of things. Again, there are so many homeless individuals here and people, housed individuals that can't afford their housing. We need to free up all these vacant housing units so that not only the price of housing can go down, you know, according to the theory of supply and demand, and so, but also that we can have properties that the city will be able to buy, or individuals can buy, to offer to homeless individuals at an affordable rate. Okay. And then we need to have some kind of law that restricts how long a property owner is able to keep a vacant unit open. For me, I would propose that no owner, property owner, or LLC or shell company should be able to have a house, a vacant house, taken off the market for more than a period of maybe a year. I think that if anybody owns a property that is being taken off the market for more than a year, should be penalized, have a fine, increased tax liability, or a chance of being able to lose their property. We need to figure out a way for the government to regulate this so that we can have, like I said, very minimal amount of homes being left unoccupied in the Bay Area, where we are experiencing a major housing crisis. It does not make any sense to me that we have 5 open units for every amount of homeless individuals. We would only have to take off 1/5, put 1/5 of these housing units back into the market, okay, to house all the homeless individuals. And then we need to change the law so that the general public is able to access what individuals own these LLCs, so that instead of a business being held liable, closing down, that the individual will be held liable. So if a business is found with a bad business practice, then the individual who owns that business will be held liable at the same time, and will not be allowed to open a new LLC based on bad business ethics and things of that nature. So by exposing who owns these businesses, like in this, a lot of these cases of shell companies buying up these properties, or what corporations own these businesses, then we can hold them personally liable and accountable for everything unethical they are doing on a business level. All right, y'all, that's my little video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I appreciate y'all. Let's keep this thing going, and I will talk to y'all next time. Peace.